Living in a world where one's love is abnormal and deviant, a club like Pulse offers a safe place away from those who choose to condemn our love simply because we love and desire differently. The film 103 Shots by Castles responds to the Pulse massacre and to the disorientation created when fear and anxiety impede expressions of love under the eye of violence. Castles' work confronts queer desire, homophobic and transphobic violence, while testifying to the struggle and endurance it takes to sit outside the hetero and homonormative structure of the binary. Peggy Phelan writes in Morning Sex, quote, "Queers are queer because we recognize that we have survived our own deaths. The law, the social, has already repudiated us, spit us out, banished us, jailed us, and otherwise quarantined us from the cultural imagination it is so anxious to keep clean, pristine, and well-guarded," end quote. On June 12, 2016, 103 shots were fired. Omar Mateen entered Pulse, a gay nightclub on Latin Night in Orlando, Florida, killing 49 people and injuring 53 others. The 103rd shot is for Mateen's life. When I heard what had happened, I was sitting at my parents' home in a small coal mining town in western Pennsylvania, where my partner at the time and I were visiting. She sat on the couch watching MSNBC, panicked. I had no words to console her simply because I had not understood what had just happened. She felt horrified, saddened, scared, and disoriented in rural Pennsylvania with a partner who was unable to offer her any emotional support. She excused herself and went upstairs. My mother looked at me and asked, "What's wrong with her?" At that moment, I felt as though I had been punched in the stomach. I felt numb, had nowhere to turn. I had inadvertently been confronted by my mother with my invisibility as a trans-identifying person, the invisibility of my love, while simultaneously realizing that those people in Orlando could have been me, my friends, or my lover. The term queer exhaustion has been in the vernacular of queer discourse for quite some time. I'm adapting the term to outline a theory of queer exhaustion that names the stressful dialectic of social and political visibility and invisibility as experienced by queer, trans, and intersex individuals in contemporary American culture. Queer exhaustion is the endless struggle between self-erasure and self-abnegation driven by continually negotiating hegemonic histories, desires, and experiences. This negotiation between invisibility and visibility require those outside of the heteronormative construct to pivot on a dime for their safety. This continual swivel and whirl create disorientation. Today, I'll be examining the disorientation found in queer exhaustion and found in Castle's 103 shots. By further examining disorientation, can it create an entrance for empathy? By empathy, I mean in the most basic sense, sharing feelings of the other by providing a feeling of oneness. I suggest Castles activates empathy in 103 shots. The sharp cuts and assaulting sound disorient the senses, creating a sense of embodiment in the viewer. A few weeks after the shooting at Pulse, I attended San Francisco Pride. Pride was supposed to be a celebration. However, surrounded by the gaze of snipers perched on the tops of buildings surrounding Dolores Park, I watched two individuals pronounce their love to one another and get engaged under the protection of those guns. Being protected by the same weapons of war used to kill our companions creates disorientation. Both psychic and physical distresses are implicit in the idea that people need to be protected in order to celebrate and proclaim their love. Also under the watch of those snipers during Pride was Castles, filming participants for 103 shots. Couples participating were asked to stand far enough apart for a white balloon to occupy the space between them. The weight of the couple's bodies provided just enough resistance so the balloon did not fall. The flexible rubber structure, when filled, allows for pressure to be applied. Once positioned in front of the stark white background, face to face, anchoring the gaze of intimacy, the couples tighten their embrace. The gesture of an embrace encourages someone to hold tight. The expression of an embrace implies crossing a distance to visibly show love's existence, romantic or otherwise. The balloon is an object of celebration and seems harmless. The action of the embrace implies affection or love, so when the embrace or loving gesture causes a pop that mimics a gunshot, disorientation occurs. Since emotions are directed by what we come into contact with, it is these emotions that move us toward or away from certain objects. When the couples make the choice to embrace, bodies come together, bursting the fragile balloon that was keeping them apart. Unsure of when the balloon will burst, the participants' reactions in 103 shots vary from pleasure to pain. Apprehension becomes visible as grimaces, closed eyes, tense jaws, and indirect gazes, as some embrace quickly, some slowly, and others reluctantly. Mimicking feelings of pleasure and pain, sexual orgasm, and falling in love, the explosiveness of what happens when a balloon is suddenly put under too much pressure is both exciting and frightening. As the viewer, scenes alternate from close-ups of faces and contracting muscles. The sound of the bursting balloon causes one to blink hard and recoil, like when you hear a gunshot or pots and pans drop to the floor. Your chest tightens and fills with fear. The wider shots of the initial embrace reveal the collapsing bodies as the balloon burst. The burst balloon ejects from in between the couples, just like a bullet from a gun. The increasing cadence of the exploding balloons creates a pulse that runs through the film, and these pops and undertones are how the bodily awareness is activated within the viewer. Substitutions and changes of positionality open the possibility of creating empathy that was absent, and in this change, the viewer becomes a witness. Before fading to black, a person's face looks anguished. Witnessing this loss, you realize you've just watched an evocation of the disorientation that occurred that night when there was no distance or separation between lover or beloved, or life and death. It is this shift in positionality that creates empathy. We consume desire, we resist it, fight against it, and will go to any lengths to even destroy it. We desire to be desired. We desire connectivity. There's an unease in the relationship one has with desire, including the distance one must traverse to act upon it. There are multiple ways one can desire, and this film underlines the beauty and tragedy or the pleasure and pain of queer desire. Fragility in the balloon creates a point at which it does break. The balloon ruptures, it breaks up, and breaks apart. Grief, trauma, and loss seemingly break apart all in its wake, especially after the loss of a loved one via breakup, breakdown, or death. The sensation of the exploding balloon, the sudden rush of adrenaline mirrors the rush after orgasm or the anxiety created when one is unsure of when the balloon will rupture. The sudden loss that occurs can be both pleasurable and painful when the distance between bodies collapse. Through disorientation, one gains another, and it is through the empathy created within 103 shots that allows people to become a witness to the testimony of queer love and loss, not implicated in its destruction and refusal. In 103 shots, the balloon acts as a stand-in for a multitude of things keeping lovers or family apart. Belief systems, fear of loss, miscommunication. To explain or understand the barrier, one must break up and relinquish the most familiar parts of oneself in order to truly know someone. If one is to truly know the other, one must embrace the disorientation that comes with these things. 103 shots shows the struggle and disorientation that occurs when fighting against what normal modes deem the right way to love or to come into being. To quote Butler, quote, "For if I am confounded by you, then you are already of me, and I am nowhere without you. I cannot muster the we except by finding the way in which I am tied to you, by trying to translate, but finding that my language must break up and yield if I am to know you. You are what I gain through this disorientation and loss. This is how the human being comes into being again and again, is that which we have yet to know," end quote. Language must break up and yield, leaving one speechless, for there are no words to encompass trauma, loss, or grief. Perhaps it is empathy, perhaps it is exactly this, knowing there will be moments with unfulfilled hope, incomprehensible pain, and perhaps having someone show up as your companion and being allowed to know you is what we gain. There's tremendous importance in having someone show up as your companion, someone who's allowed to witness your exhaustion, your pain, and disorientation. How can one ever orient themselves again after such loss? Pulse, pride, a family's home are supposed to be safe places. However, when you have nowhere you can truly feel safe and seen, this is exhausting. Returning to the story of when I first heard about the Orlando shooting, I needed my partner, but I also needed to be a partner. I needed to bear witness to her pain and disorientation. I needed to see her struggle, to fully come face to face with the invisibility of my desire and love to my family. But I failed to fully witness my partner, just as my mother failed to see us, to see me. By making our way through disorientation, we find where and who we come to feel at home with. In witnessing others' pain and trauma, we come to know our own. The dilemmas of love and desire don't yield simple answers, for they create feelings of attachment. And in these feelings of attachment and love, one realizes there is potentiality for great loss. While the couples in 103 shots stand within reach of one another, the distance between threatens to divide, rendering the chance to embrace slipping away and falling out of reach. 103 shots asks us to hold tight to one another in the face of fear, suffering, and great loss. The idea of embracing through the giant unexpected pause is asking us to not let go, but in fact squeeze harder. As if I am looking at you, asking you to not let go of me, no matter how scary and hard it all becomes. Even if I die here in your arms, don't let go. Thank you.